So of all the forms of marketing that exist, I would say bandit signs are probably my favorite. And that's because of a combination of the super low cost and really low technical knowledge required to implement this, and the really, really high effectiveness of this type of marketing if you do it correctly. This is why I wrote a 42-page ebook that walks you through exactly how I implement a bandit sign campaign. It's step by step, and you can download it for free at the link below. And in this video, I'm gonna go over the top 5 tips that I would recommend if you're gonna implement your own bandit sign campaign. I'm Kirby Atwell from Living Off Rentals, where we believe high quality rentals are the best investment a person can make. So if you got this far into the video and you're like, what the heck is this guy keep talking about when he says bandit signs? Bandit signs are just a real estate industry term for those little signs, usually plastic signs that you see on the side of the road that say some version of "We Buy Houses." So most people think that those signs are pretty cheesy and an unsophisticated way of marketing, so they must not be effective. But because they are cheesy and unsophisticated, that's what makes them effective. That's because you need to keep in mind that about 98% of people out there should list their house on the open market when they want to sell. They should list it with a realtor, and they should just sell it in the traditional way to a retail buyer. The other 2% are the 2% that you're speaking directly to with bandit signs. These are the people that have houses that they can't list on the open market for some reason or another, or they have situations in their life that's preventing them from listing it, or they need to sell it very quickly. And so you can speak directly to them by putting up your signs and saying, hey, I buy houses, and I buy houses in any condition. I buy them for cash, and I buy them fast. And so as an investor, you're gonna come across the types of people that you really want to be speaking to. If you wanna go and pursue the other 98%, be my guest, it's a big challenge to try to get somebody to sell their house at a discount when there's really no reason for them to do so. But for the 2% who have these issues, you know, the types of people who have called me from bandit signs have been hoarders. They've been people who are in town because they just inherited a property and they don't want the property and they just want to get rid of it. It's people who, like one lady who had just gotten locked out of her house by the health department because it was so unsanitary that she couldn't even live there anymore, so she needed to sell it. There was another one who, it was multiple brothers who had inherited a house, and they absolutely hated each other, didn't even want to talk to each other. They almost got in a fist fight at the closing table. So these are the types of situations that a retail buyer is just not equipped to work through. But you as an investor, you can work through, solve these problems, and a lot of times get that house at an excellent deal. So if you're just getting started, I think this is the absolute best marketing strategy that you can implement. It's what I implemented for years when I couldn't afford anything else. And eventually you'll probably have a much bigger marketing budget, and you'll be able to implement other strategies that don't require as much manual work. But in the beginning, if you're willing to put in a little bit of work, then you're gonna get some of the best, the absolute best off-market deals that exist. So I highly recommend you download that 42-page ebook that I wrote, but in addition, I'm gonna go over the FOPTIVE top 5. So I highly recommend you download that 42-page ebook that I wrote, but in addition, I'm gonna go over the top 5 tips that I would recommend if you're going to implement your own bandit sign campaign. So tip number 1, this is the first big question that I typically get around bandit signs, and this revolves around location. And this ties in with the question of, is this legal in my location? Every area is going to be a little bit different, but here's the general rule of thumb that you want to follow. You want to put up bandit signs in very working class areas where they're going to get a lot of traffic. So if you live in a city, like I lived in Chicago when I was doing this, we recently moved over to Northwest Indiana, but when I was doing this heavily, I was in the city of Chicago. And so I would target the middle to lower middle income areas in the suburbs, and I would put up my bandit signs in the highways, the main highways that ran through those areas at the stoplights, because they would get a ton of traffic. People would be stopped there, they'd see your sign, they'd write down the number. I wouldn't put them up in the highest end suburbs because number one, they're gonna be taken down before they're very effective. And number two, there's just less problem properties in those areas because the price points are higher and they're more competitive. So you typically just don't see as much inventory of these off-market deals. This ties in with the other question around location, and that is, are these signs legal? And every town is going to have a different ordinance around signage. So check in the areas where you want to put up the signs what the ordinances are, but also recognize that every town is going to enforce this differently. So some towns are going to be very strict and they're going to take the signs down right away. Other towns are not really going to care that much and they're going to leave the signs up. So some of it will be trial and error and some of it you can check out ahead of time in the ordinance. The second tip that I recommend relates to the question of what phone number should I use on the sign and what do I say when a person calls me from the sign? So if you're unfamiliar with the town ordinances around signage or you're testing a new area, I'd highly recommend that you do not put your personal cell phone or your business phone number on the sign. What I've done ever since my very first Bandit Sign campaign almost a decade ago was to just get a free Google Voice phone number that can be tied to any Gmail email address, and then you can download the Google Voice app right on your cell phone, and you can answer those calls on your cell phone as they come in, but they're calling an anonymous Google Voice phone number. This allows you to do two different things. Number one, it lets you set up a voicemail specifically for this new Google Voice number that speaks directly to sellers. So when you get a call on your cell phone, you can see it's from your Bandit Signs and you can decide, do I have the time to pick up that call and talk to the seller? Or you can let it go to the voicemail box that you have set up that just says, hey, leave your name, your phone number, and the address of the property, and then you can screen that property and call the seller back later when you have more time. The second thing it does is it allows you to be totally anonymous. So if you find that you put these up in an area that's not friendly to Bandit Signs, you can avoid any problems. This ties into the second question around phone line, and that is, what do you say when somebody actually calls you from a Bandit Sign? You know, this can be a little bit intimidating at first when you don't know what questions to ask. So I put together a call-in script. Again, in the description, there's a link to it. It's free. So it just walks you through the main questions that you're probably going to want to know from a potential seller. The third main key to implementing an effective Bandit Sign strategy ties in with the question of, where do I even get Bandit Signs from? I've purchased Bandit Signs from a lot of different suppliers over the years since I started doing this about a decade ago. And initially I was buying them from local different sign shops. And what I found is that the margin on Bandit Sign sales is just not that high. So if a local supplier is willing to give you a really good deal, which is what you need in order to buy a lot of these, but they're not doing a ton of volume, then they're probably not going to be around very long. So eventually I found an online supplier called Signs on the Cheap, and I have no affiliation with this company, but this is who I've bought my signs from for the last several years, and it's been about the best deal that I can find on Bandit Signs. Signs on the Cheap will actually print whatever message or text that you want on the signs, but you can also just buy blank signs in bulk if you want, and you can handwrite your message on the sign. This takes a lot more time, obviously. It is a little bit cheaper, and some people actually say that it's more effective because it feels more personal to sellers as opposed to maybe more professional looking sign that looks like it might be from a larger company. The price point per sign is cheaper the more signs that you order, but just one word of caution that you don't want to order too many signs that all have the same message, because you're probably going to want to test different messages around your area just to see what resonates with sellers the best. Also, you might want to change your number on the sign, your phone number on the sign at some point. If you want to put them up in a new area that maybe has a different area code and you want it to match that area code, that might be a time where you don't want to have 1,000 signs printed with your old phone number sitting there that you can no longer use. I recommend ordering the heavy duty zip ties from Amazon. And also make sure you get the longer zip ties, the 18 to 24 inch ties, because initially I got the shorter ones, the 12-inch ones, and I realized there's some telephone poles that were too big for that to fit around. So I'd have to put two of them together it's much easier to just get the longer ones. My final tip on implementing a Bandit Sign campaign revolves around the effectiveness that you can expect when you implement this as your marketing strategy. So how many calls or how many deals should I expect when I put up Bandit Signs? Obviously, there's a lot of variables that make it very difficult to provide a specific answer on the effectiveness of Bandit Signs, like, what town you put them up in, or what street corners you put them up on, or what message you use, or what the market conditions are at the time. But I can tell you what my effectiveness has been. The typical response rate that I get after putting up 50 signs in a weekend is that I'll get anywhere from 1 call to 10 calls the following week. Now, some signs will stay up for weeks and you'll get a call 3 weeks down the road from a sign that you put up 3 weeks ago, but the vast majority of calls are gonna come in the following week after that campaign. That's why you need to do this consistently, one weekend after another. So if you're getting 1 call to 10 calls per week, you can expect, say, anywhere from 5 calls to 30 calls a month. And out of those 5 to 30 calls, again, those are really motivated sellers. They're the right type of off-market sellers to be calling you. They're not going to be your retail typical sellers for the most part. And so you can realistically expect to get 1 great off-market deal per month if you're doing this consistently, putting up 50 signs per week. That's been my general rule of thumb. Some months you'll get more than that, some months you'll get less, but overall, it's going to average to about 1 deal per month in my experience. So hopefully this overview and top tips for implementing an effective Bandit Sign campaign was beneficial for you as you're looking at different marketing strategies. If you're just getting started, again, I think this is one of the best strategies that you can implement. If this was beneficial for you, please hit that like button. Also, hit the subscribe button because I release videos on this channel on a weekly basis on helpful rental investing related topics. You can also head on over to Facebook and join the Living Off Rentals Facebook community. I hope to see you there, but if not, I'll see you in the next video.